This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland went to the lane, lobbed to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs Media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including Bally Sports Ohio, without cable. There's no cost and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. The Cleveland Cavaliers stood pat at the deadline, but they went out and got a loud victory against the Brooklyn Nets. They are 3 games up over the Milwaukee Bucks and the New York Knicks in the loss columns, 16-1 in their last 17 games. And joining me today is my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
Justin, I'm doing great. The Cavs did exactly what I wanted to at the deadline, which is nothing. They went out, played a shorthanded Nets team, but their 6th game in 9 nights, all in different cities. Super, we were talking before the game, like before we went live, like how many 6 and 9s do you think have ever been undefeated, in NBA history? Probably not that many, So the fact that the team has pulled off their second 8-game winning streak in 2024 is really, really cool. The fact that they didn't get trapped, and like again, this team takes pride. They had the game like in relative control throughout the first half, but then second half starts. Ben Simmons gets tied up with Jared Allen. A shoving match ensues, and then Justin. Oh no! It's a Cavalanche! They absolutely destroyed the Brooklyn Nets with a 21-0 run, perhaps in retaliation for that shove from Ben Simmons. And it was just so fun. It just felt like, wait, hey, like, no, you're not going to try to punk us. You're not even in our league. That's what they did. They took over the game, and it was super fun.
Jared Allen responding in that moment was really awesome. And I just loved kind of his reaction when he walked away, like that he's just kind of laughing. Like that's never a good sign when you get into a tussle with a guy and he just starts laughing uncontrollably. That never goes well for you. And it certainly did not go well for the Brooklyn Nets. I like the way that the Cavs responded in that stretch. Just a dominant run. And I think we should start off rather than, diving into these games, because I don't think there's tons of takeaways from these games. I think the main story of, going 6-0 over this 9-day stretch is the depth that the Cavs have. And I think that is a story that ties into the lack of a move at the trade deadline. And frankly, like I was a little bit nervous today at the trade deadline because I'm looking at how well this team has been playing. I'm looking at the things that we've talked about in the past, which is if everybody's doing their job and they're playing well, do they address the needs that we have, right? Like when Dean Wade is playing as confident and having an awesome game like he has tonight, that is exactly what you need from a third big. When Mobley is doing his thing, that's exactly what you need from him. Mitchell and Garland, when they're clicking, that's exactly what you need. And I was just sitting there, I was like, you look at some of the rumors, and I didn't want to be sitting here on the podcast being like, man, it's a name brand version of what we already have. And it might make some of the media, like national media that talks about the team, feel a little bit better about the Cavs. But I'd be sitting here being like, 1, does it make us better? 2, are we going to be able to integrate this piece in time? And 3, like, what's it going to do to the chemistry in the locker room? Like, I think back to the Antoine Jameson edition at the deadline, and sure, I was excited about that because we had all of those, playoff series against Washington, a stretch 4, that's going to be perfect alongside us. And it just, the vibes never really recovered after that point. And you look at names like Dorian Finney-Smith, like Royce O'Neal, and I'm like, are these guys better than what we currently have? And is it worth shaking up the locker room? And I think the answer from Kobe Altman and the rest of the front office was we didn't feel that the moves were available were either going to make us better or worth sacrificing the chemistry that we have.
I think that's all correct, and I do want to start before we talk about chemistry, because I do think that is, if you're a critic of them standing pat, you might say, oh, well, they're over-indexing on a fun run in January and February and not thinking about the postseason. And I think you should make the case that a great trade wasn't out there throwing out any chemistry concerns. Because the reality is,
it's a great point. Thank you.
Like last year, I really thought they needed to make a move for, a volume 3-point shooter on the wing, because that wasn't an archetype they had. Every name that was tied to the Cavs was archetypes they had, just as you mentioned, maybe a brand name or, a Coke or Pepsi type player, or, maybe someone with a little more pedigree or more seasoning or more consistent
salary.
And that's the other thing is, all of them were higher salaries pretty much than their equivalent, or not quite as important for what the Cavs need. You look at a guy like Royce O'Neal, who's a very good role player, but he's not a 4. And that's where they really, I think if they were looking for an upgrade or consistency, you'd look at that backup 4 spot. So I think the combination of, they kind of have all the archetypes they need. They have limited draft flexibility right now to go chase, to go big game hunting, which was the only trade that I would have found interesting. And then in order to do a marginal upgrade in one spot, you'd have to end up actually downgrading somewhere else. You look at a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith, a guy like Bojan Bogdanovic. You're not just sending one deal out to upgrade there. You're not just going like for like. And so I actually
consolidating for a 35-year-old.
Yeah, that's
in Bojan's case,
and that didn't sit right with me, especially given the depth the Cavs have. So I think ultimately this was the right move to stand pat. I thought it would have been interesting if they went and found did what the Boston Celtics did and go grab a guy like Xavier Tillman's bird rights, but the Celtics gave the Grizzlies a great deal. They took the money into a trade exception and gave them 2 seconds by all reports, and that wasn't a deal the Cavs were going to be able to match. Yeah. Free cost savings and draft capital. I couldn't find a trade that I liked, and even the more optimistic ones that fans make for their team. So I thought it was the right move to stand pat. It might feel a little rough because I do think New York got better, and we'll talk about that later. And I think Philly got better. But ultimately you can't get into an arms race without thinking about the context of your own roster. And with what the Cavs had, I think it was the right choice to keep their powder dry.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, the name brand players are always going to be more attractive until you yourself have a playoff run, and the role players that you have, once they get on that stage, usually that's when perception starts to change, right? Dean Wade having a healthy playoffs, I think, would make a big difference because he's been a really impactful player. And you think back to even when Andre Drummond was on the team, and some of the rumors there, it's maybe the Cavs can get Dwight Powell and Jalen Brunson as a throw-in, and it's we don't really know anything about these guys. And then Brunson, obviously there wasn't a trade out there for Drummond, but the way that people will just kind of throw around lesser names on a roster until those guys actually become established, I think sometimes it's too easy to overlook. And then the other factor is too, you look at kind of the outside of the core, the guys that would be most available for salary matching, Karis LeVert and George Niang, top of mind. Neither of those guys, I think it would feel really bad to move those guys because Karis LeVert took a pay cut to be here. He's playing fantastic this year, has been so valuable off the bench. George Niang left the Sixers because he believed in what the Cavs had available to him, had a terrific January. I liked what he gave us tonight in Brooklyn. For a team that is trying to be like, hey, we have a winning culture, like free agents, you can come here, that has a mid-level exception this summer, like going around and flipping your free agent signings for a lateral move or a cost-saving move, like that could mess with the culture in the locker room. Like, that's tough. The only player that really moved today that I'm like, oh man, that'd be great, was PJ Washington, and he moved for far more than the Cavs had available to offer.
Were he and Gafford the only firsts that got moved?
Toronto gave up a first for Kelly Olynyk and Ochai Agbaji.
That was surprising, but it made more sense once you heard the more reported details. Yeah, I mean, and the other thing about them not making a move is whoever you trade for, if you trade for a guy with like of any renown and then don't put them in your rotation, one, especially if they're on like an expiring contract, one, they're gonna hate you. Like, that's indisputable. If you trade for a guy who's playing and say,
I think
come here,
actually written into the CBA.
Come here and don't play, or maybe you might not play because Sam Merrill's got a good thing going. Like, they're not going to be down for that. So you end up backing yourself into corners when you make those kind of transactions. And by the way, that's an anxiety I even have on the buyout market. Though less so because it's the buyout market. But like, you really got to set the expectation, because the Cavs are running 10 deep right now. You look at the postseason, they're probably not going to run more than 9. I haven't seen a 10-man playoff rotation ever. Yeah. Even Steve Kerr at his Steve Curriest was not running 10-man rotations. And, so at least one of the guys that's currently in the rotation is probably going to drop out. And the reality is, 2 of them might drop out. They might go to 8, depending on the playoff matchup. So to add a third player who has been good enough to play for you in the playoffs that might just not get to, like, especially, and to give up draft capital or to swap out assets, like, that's just that. None of that sounded appealing to me, especially with the names on that were available. I just didn't see anyone that was going for solid role players and second rounders, which is pretty much what the Cavs had to offer. And I didn't see anyone there, and I'm kind of glad that the Cavs weren't kicking up dust either. This was a time where I actually really appreciated how kind of famously discreet the Cavs front office is in the media, because like, you think about what it's like to be a player during deadline day. It's a brutal day, and you're just hearing like Cavs, like in years past, you would say Cavs furiously working towards something, and then it just doesn't end up happening. It's like, oh, well, that sucks. I thought we had something good going. Like the Cavs, like, sometimes when teams say we like what we have, we're not really looking, it's posturing and they're trying to, get people to come down on their asking price. Hey, we're not actually that desperate. Like, I think the Cavs, every message coming up to this day was Cavs probably going to make a deal. And I think in this spot, it's one where you want to take them at their word. I think they did like what they have. I think, they asked the players were like, yeah, we're good. And like that stuff matters.
Yeah, that was one of my big takeaways from Kobe's presser, and I would encourage people, if you're interested in getting those explanations, go to the Cavs YouTube channel. The availability is there. But yeah, he mentioned that, talking to the locker room yesterday, guys basically saying, we like what we have. We don't want to shake this up. We believe in what we have. Like, I understand that would hold weight. Obviously, they're going to do their due diligence and see if there's opportunities to really move the needle. But when you're talking about lateral moves, when you're talking about cost saving, like little moves on the margins, like, Utah reportedly, moving Olynyk and Agbaji so that they can give Lowry a max contract, or like, so Indiana, moving Buddy Hield to the Sixers and then finding a more cost-effective version in Dougie McBuckets there, right? Like, that was a smart piece of business for them, but they're not on like this type of a run that the Cavs are on. And the question that I asked Kobe was, balancing, having, looking at potential acquisitions that can fill a need on your roster and trying to weigh that against, hey, we want to leave some responsibilities available because we believe our internal growth, the guys that we have on this roster can step up and, fulfill those tasks. And I think Dean Wade is one of the prime examples of that. I think Isaac Okoro, the growth he has shown is very significant. And then when you talk about, like the need for front court playmaking, you're seeing Jared Allen and Evan Mobley step up into the role. And the thing he basically said is like, we have an understanding of who we have in our locker room. We outline our plan for what our vision is for these guys. And as long as like they're continuing to progress and we feel like they can still achieve these things, we're not going to go out and address this need because we have a belief in who we have in the locker room. And I think, honestly, like, I'm going to speak for myself, and I'm always going to come across as more optimistic. That's just my demeanor, and that's the way that I look at my favorite teams. But like, guys, like as Cavs fans, I think we got to start really believing in what we got going on. This is really, really special. Whether it's going 6-0 over a stretch like this, whether it's having the best road record in the NBA, like the signs are here. This is a legitimate team. This is a team that can actually make some noise. And to link back to our season preview, feeling a little 2015 Warriors-y, where, they might need a few breaks along the way, but I think that this is a team that's capable of making a deep run.
Yeah, I mean, not to go small market martyr, but, I just think
if that's tough, I eat that up. Go for it.
I know. But like, I think if the Knicks had started this we're on a 16-1 run, I just think people would be elevating them to conference finals appearances at minimum,
Yeah.
Like the Clippers, for example, are getting a lot of now. The Clippers have better pedigree at the top, and the Cavs are gonna get judged on kind of a negative curve nationally until we get to the postseason. And frankly, I think it's kind of fair, because they were the darlings last year, and a lot of people picked them, and the playoffs didn't go well. So I get why everyone is going to apply, a healthy dose of salt to any kind of prognostication about the Cavs run. But like, I think it's important to note they are on a pace that far exceeds last year.
Yeah.
We're looking at 55, 56, 57 wins on the pace they're on right now. And with worse injury luck comparatively. So
yeah,
and I just feel like things are just, things are coming together in a way where they're getting some of these lighter matchups, easier matchups. Now the schedule's been hard in terms of the physical scheduling, but the matchups have been lighter as of late, which I think is just so great because JB gets to play with what a 10-man rotation looks like in an environment where he can have a lineup not work. Darius can figure out how to reintegrate, and get and find his rhythm without, having to force things. And that I just feel like they're just a ball rolling downhill, picking up more and more and more momentum. Like it doesn't feel like they've hit, max velocity yet.
No, they certainly haven't. And I think when you look at teams right around the league, it's okay. Clippers add James Harden. They go 0-5 right after. There's an integration period. It takes them a while, even after that, to find their stride. And now they're the hottest team in the Western Conference. Have very rarely lost unless they're playing the Cavs. You look at the Milwaukee Bucks bringing in Doc Rivers. Like they've gone through an adjustment period here. And I think if you were bringing in someone new that's going to have a role post-trade deadline, like there's going to be an integration period. And the fact that they've been able to, weather the storm and allow Garland and Mobley to kind of get their sea legs under them. Kobe mentioned that he doesn't really expect the minute restriction to be lifted until after the All-Star break for those guys. And kind of hopes that, can knock on wood, but stay healthy after then. And that's when the team is really going to hit its stride. Like, that's exciting. The fact that you go 7-0 since reintegrating these guys, and they're still not at the level that we expect them to be at, or where they've been at in the past, more so Garland than Mobley, let's be honest. But like, that is really, really encouraging. And the funny thing is, like, I do think anyone that's skeptical, whether you're a Cleveland fan, whether you're just a fan of the NBA and you're skeptical about the Cavs, like I think that's justified, right? Like we all choose how much hope we want to sprinkle into our analysis, or we all kind of, we have our biases. I certainly have tons when I'm talking about other teams too. But I also think it's kind of funny because we kind of accept when we're talking about a young team that gets better. We always say, they take these steps, eventually you become a playoff team, then you're going to get smacked your first time in the playoffs. And then usually you learn from that experience. But because we're such prisoners of the moment, it's, oh, they got smacked, so now we can write them off entirely. We don't have to ever think about this team. We don't have to analyze them. When there's so many indicators of like growth from this unit, right? The defense is still elite. The Cavs have a starting lineup where there isn't a single negative defender in their starting five, right? We had questions about integrating Max Strus. Defense has been elite once again with that lineup. All the individual numbers for each of them individually, all strong. The Cavs are now the best road team in the NBA. That was not the case last season. And that is typically, along with net rating, one of the biggest indicators of whether or not a team is a contender or a team that's just kind of doing well in the regular season. They get better when they play better competition. Their defense against top 10 offenses is the best in the league. Their offense, half-court offense against top 10 defenses is better than it is against lesser competition. So they're a team that rises to the occasion. There's a lot of indicators like that I think you can point to and say, okay, this is different than last year. Beyond the depth, beyond the shooting, there is indications in terms of how they've played that tell you that this is a better team than it was last year, and that's with them still not being at the best version that we believe they can get to. And
all great, awesome points. Want to note that the Cavs went 20-21 on the road last year. They are 16-8 right now on the road. So they are looking to blow past that number. And one other thing I thought was worth noting. This is just, again, more evidence as to why I'm glad they didn't make a trade. Because whatever trade they would be doing, I think, whatever move they'd be doing, I'm not going to learn more about the structure of the team's health moving forward. I've said it a billion times. If you're a regular listener, you're probably sick of me saying this. Like, all I wanted from the offseason was to give them a roster that allowed me to, appropriately analyze the core four and how they look in a playoff setting, because I don't think that the roster was able to do that for them last year. They have that roster right now. So, yeah, I guess if you had a better three, like a 4-5 that you really, really trusted, or I don't know, like a backup one that, you could replace Rubio with, cool, I guess. But none of that helps me. No, that doesn't really move the needle of me being able to analyze the core four. And that's my number one goal intellectually with the Cavs this season. So they have everything.
Can I just
go ahead.
Your thought off for 1 second? It breaks my heart because we were so excited in preseason with how it looked. It breaks my heart that Ty Jerome isn't part of this, because we had a 6'5" two-way point guard that shoots the three and never turns the ball over like that. And you know what? That has to be part of the Cavs calculus too, right? He's not that is potentially someone, even if it's not this season, that you have in house that's going to be available to address needs and give you ball handling. It's just so funny that we haven't had him available, and that rather than give up assets for that, you have Craig Porter Jr. in house, and you have Ty, who hopefully the surgery helps him actually get back on the right track here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the roster just, I think, has what it needs for me to analyze where they are. I don't think they need to make a move that turns them into a title contender this year, and I don't really think they had the pieces to do that anyway. So keep your powder dry. You have what you need to go make a run at a conference finals, and if you get there, everything's gravy from there. If you outperform that, amazing. But
if you get to the conference finals, you are a contender and you have a chance to win a championship. You are a couple breaks away.
Yeah,
that's it, plain and simple.
That's the truth of it. So if they, I think they have a roster that's good enough to get there, especially with how the seeding is starting to play out. They're 3 games up on the loss column on the Bucks and the Knicks, 4 on the Sixers, 2 games up on the Bucks and the Knicks in general. And both in the Knicks, obviously just announced that OG Anunoby was having surgery on his elbow. Randall's out for another couple weeks as well. The Bucks are just a mess right now. They've lost 3 in a row, got blown out at home by Minnesota with a very challenging remaining schedule. I want to say they're 5th most challenging after tonight. So, I just feel like when you have the 2 seed, you're going to walk into a favorable first round matchup, and then you have a real chance against whoever you're going against in that 2-3. The top of the East is tough, but the top of the East also has plenty of flaws. Yeah. You're probably going to be annoyed with me for jumping into it now, but I will say this: I do think the Knicks got better in their reported deals for Bogdanovich and Alec Burks. I don't think they got better in a way that makes me significantly more or less nervous about them as a Cavs opponent. The things that make them a tough matchup for the Cavs are not things that Alec Burks and Bojan Bogdanovic do, if that makes sense. It's cool to have that, but it was more like if RJ Barrett had a good game, it was okay, well, that's fine, but that's not why we lost, I feel like that's kind of again, I think those guys are really helpful players. I mean, Bojan is having one of the weirdest late career 20-point per game surges. He's turning 35 before the playoffs, and he's averaging 20 points a game when he was a role guy most of his career. But good player. He will help them, and in some matchups, I think Bojan will be whoa, we're so glad we have him. But for the Cavs, I'm worried about the same stuff that I was worried about last year, and it's just a matter of whether they can overcome it.
Yeah, I think from a Cavs perspective, how far they go in the playoffs isn't going to be dictated by anyone that was available and that got moved today at the trade deadline. How far they go is going to be reliant on how well they play, how well they execute. And JB said it after the game when I believe it was Chris Fedor that asked him what you want from Darius, and he said, same thing as everyone else. We want everybody to be the most confident, most aggressive versions of themselves. And I think you're seeing Dean Wade being quick trigger from 3. You're seeing Isaac Okoro take corner 3-pointers in transition, Carter. That made me so damn excited. He's in his corner, the game-winning spot against the Nets. The Cavs are going to look at the buyout market to see who's available there. Kobe mentioned that. They're
going to have to sign some folks soon.
Yeah, obviously the possibility of converting Craig Porter Jr. Still remains there. They got 2 roster spots to fill out, but Hayes in the barn, man. They've got what they need. They've got all the help they need, just like we have the help we need from Zoom. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Carter, I do want to push back just a little bit. I think I agree with your overall sentiment, and let's dive into it. Let's look at what our peers have done across the Eastern Conference. And I do think Bojan as a stretch for historically what's given the Cavs defense some trouble is those bigs that can pull up from 3, even though Evan and Jarrett are so good in space. I think sometimes when we play Chet, when we've played Cat in the past, there have been times where that has tested the Cavs defensive integrity. And I find it interesting because there's 2 sides to that coin. I do love the addition of Alec Burks. He's a player that I'd love to have on the roster. He's a solid 2-way guard. He's played well against us. Bojan and his ability to unlock the offense and unstick it, I think is going to be really, really helpful. It does give me some pause. I think it changes the shape of a matchup because as terrific as OG Anunoby is defensively and as impactful as Mitch Robinson, who hopefully, he's going to get healthy and he'll be available for those series. as impactful as they are, Jalen Brunson, Bogdanovich, and Randall defensively, that's a lot to cover up for. And it reminds me of the Bucks adding Damian Lillard, where yes, from a talent standpoint, it's very helpful, but it's going to change how those matchups feel. And I think there's still enough depth there for them to stagger and, you know, have defensive coverage. But if all three of those guys are on the court at the same time, I feel like with the Cavs offense the way that it is, we might start to see a high scoring version of Cavs Knicks rather than the, you know, rock fights that we've had in the past.
Yeah, I mean that, and I think that probably plays in the Cavs' favor. You know,
I'd imagine so.
I just think the Knicks dragged the Cavs into the ugliest basketball possible, and you know the Cavs, for all their strength as a defensive team, I've never liked them in rock fights. You know, like I just feel like, you know, that physicality that the Knicks have, that started to, you know, win the day in that setting. So I don't think they'll ever play Randall and Bogdanovich at the same time. That's a pocket theory I have. Because I think their depth is quite good. And you know, obviously, you know, now they can do some uber big lineups that are interesting where you just play OG at the 2 and just say, because he guards perimeter guys as well as anyone, and you're not giving up a lot of spacing. That is interesting to me. And just they would just probably, you know, hide Bogdanovich on the burliest dude that they could put him on. Just say, you know, you don't got to run, buddy. But yeah, I mean, I do think they're better. I think Burks is one of those guys who's always been a very helpful in theory and will win you some games guy. But you know, I think I'm of the opinion he's just gotten a tinge overrated. But like, so to me, I think this is much more about Bogdanovich.
I just have too many fond memories of him. Like, I just really like
he hit a game-winning dunk for us. Thank you very much.
So, I think that was in his first game too, right?
I believe so.
Against these Nets in Brooklyn.
That's true. But yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, like, it's an interesting change. I think they're better. I think it's a big move in terms of just picking up that salary that rolls over. I think that's part of it. You know, they're not pot committed to Bogdanovich. They didn't give up crazy draft capital. By the way, all the teams that have all this crazy draft capital didn't really give up any. Everyone's keeping their powder dry right now. But I think they'll be better against some teams, and maybe they'll be better against the Cavs. But like, I don't think it was just a purely additive deadline for them against the Cavs, because like the people they added, if they're on the floor, they're going to have to be given some stuff back.
Yeah, it's
Knicks fans would be telling me I was, you know, full cope right now, but I really do think that.
Yeah, and I talked a little bit to our buddy Andrew Claudio from Knicks Film School too, and I just want to get his sense, because it was like when we had talked about like previewing that series before, part of why I was like, the Knicks are going to be around for a long time, and I still believe this. The Knicks are going to be around for a long time. It's a well-built team. It's just so interesting to me that like the internal growth options they had, like their quote-unquote young core of Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Quentin Grimes, Obi Toppin, all of those guys are gone for veterans, and like that's just such a seismic shift. And he's like, yeah, like some of that's tough to stomach, but you know, winning cures all, which I totally understand.
And if they don't do an all-in trade, they should be able to get some developmental guys via the draft, because they have like 20 firsts.
Right. They can move up in the draft and bring those type of guys in. And OG's like still young enough too, right? So
how
like,
old is he? Is he like mid-20s, 24,
I think
25?
Yeah, 25, 26. But like,
but they're not like the Cavs anymore. Like you know, they had a lot of guys who were, you know, 22, 23, and just like the Cavs. And then they had Randall, who was like kind of and Brunson were kind of the lone quote unquote old guys. Like, they're all 27, 28-year-olds now, I feel.
Right.
Or much older in the case of Bogdanovich.
Yeah, you're correct. And it's funny, like, maybe it's Cavs being 3 games up in the loss column. Like, my focus is so much shifted from what are these other teams doing to just solely being about the Cavs right now. Right?
Very
like,
much so.
How can we optimize these next 32 games to get better, to be the best version of ourselves, because I really do think that, like, if we're playing at our best, there's not really, like, we can beat anybody. We can beat anybody in a series, and by playing at our best, we're going to give ourselves the easiest path. And like the Philly move, I was happy to see them get Buddy healed, because any help they can get right now while Embiid is out is welcomed. I am rooting for them to win games, because I do not want them dropping the play-in, because I think they will win that first play-in game, and I do not want the 2-7 to be against Joel Embiid and the Philadelphia 76ers.
Me neither, buddy.
Yeah, so please, let's as Cavs fans, let's show some brotherly love to our friends in Philadelphia. We all know I'm a big Sixers fan. Here they come.
Honest basketball. That's what you love about them.
I just adore them. I adore everything about that team. So let's continue to, burn sage, do whatever you need to do to give positive energy and vibes to the Philadelphia 76ers. Because that would not be a fun way to greet us.
Can I pivot to back to the Nets game, because I do think it actually speaks to one thing that I am most interested.
Yeah, I was honestly, in my roundabout rambling way, that's where I was getting to, because I wanted to talk about what we're doing and where I see opportunities for growth. So go ahead.
So the one thing I have been kind of just waiting for, I wouldn't call it angsting. Don't accuse me of angsting, Justin. Don't you dare. Hands up. However, one thing I do want to see is that starting lineup start kicking ass. Like their numbers have just been okay throughout the year.
What was that third quarter to you?
Justin, can you let me get to the point? Jesus Christ. I said hands up. That was a metaphorical hands and verbal shut up so I can get through this. You jerk. And to me, the third quarter was the first time we've really seen like the ultimate iteration of what this starting lineup, what we thought we were going to get at the beginning of the year, that's just kind of been deferred due to injury, due to, guys just not being quite right, getting in sync with each other. That was the first time we saw the Cavs starting five blow the doors off a team and end a game. And that is the number one indicator, because I really believe in this team's second, third, fourth, fifth lineup iterations. I want to see those five do what I thought they were going to do at the beginning of the year, and that's kick the snot out of teams.
Mm-hmm. Great point. I'm sorry for yelling at you.
Yeah, I can't believe when I was so clearly setting it up. My God, I even said I want to pivot it back to the Nets game.
I'm always aware of it. Like I can see myself out.
If you're in the YouTube chat, boo this man. Come on.
Yeah, like I see it as an out of body experience where I'm being a man baby, and I'm like, as good as this stretch has been, 16-1. Like that probably tells you something about who I am. I'm still punchy and defensive. Like that's where we're at right now. You're right. Like I want to see that lineup click, and
everyone's booing you in the chat.
Hell yeah, love that. But I think this has been a nice stretch, particularly like Evan Mobley has been so good, so productive in this minutes restriction time. The jumper looks great, the playmaking, the off the dribble stuff, like he is looking like that unicorn type player that, maybe some of it was, hey, we just haven't seen him in a little while. And it's, oh yeah, everything he does fits in so nicely. But I'm just so excited to see his growth. The jumper in particular, like it looks so much smoother. There isn't a hitch in it anymore. I like that, like he's actually getting guys to close out on pump fakes now and blowing by them. Like this is just, another step in the development and another reminder that, hey, Evan Mobley is 22 damn years old. Like this stuff takes time, but he's ridiculously exciting. I think DG over this stretch, like of all the guys that are tired from a 6 games in 9-day stretch, he's probably at the top of the list just because, he had such a prolonged stretch of not getting like any activity at all. Like it's not even like preseason. This post pre-All-Star break stretch, I don't think it's even like preseason, because preseason, you're coming off a summer where you were working your ass off the whole time. You're getting in shape, and then it's about getting into game shape. he's trying to get in regular shape and then game shape, right? So there's another hurdle there. I thought tonight was another step in the right direction. I still don't think he has his legs underneath him. I love that he's still competing on defense. But the one thing that I want to note is I think he needs to get back first to where he was last year in terms of playing off ball and moving when Donovan has the ball. He needs to get back to that stretch. He was one of the more productive off ball players in the league last year. But once he gets to that level, I think he's got to go to another level and to really kind of integrate himself into the way that the Cavs have been playing without him. Because, yeah, there's still going to be times where a lot of times where Garland is the primary initiator. He's bringing the ball up. But in order for this offense to be as deadly as possible and as playoff proof as possible, he needs to be more than just a spacer off ball. He needs to be bending defenses with his activity, with his movement off the ball, and really kind of, diving into the Steph tape and learning from it. Because I think that is going to open up opportunities, especially with the starting lineup where, you're really relying on those three guys to provide the spacing. That type of movement is going to generate opportunities for other teams that I don't think any defense can really slow down.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I really do like what that group is creating in the half court right now. I think they're getting consistently good looks. Like every now and again, you'll see the interior pass where it's like, hey guys, there's 4 guys in the paint right now. You can't do that pass. But for the most part, I think they're running a lot of good stuff to kind of combat the whatever spacing issues they're having. And I do think Darius, more than anyone, is the number one swing factor for the rest of the year. Like if he finds his form and gets up to the all-star level he's been at for the last 2 years, then we're gonna kill everyone. We're killing everyone with him finding his footing, and it allows for, Donovan Mitchell to come back to this earth for a minute, because he has not been of this earth for the last week or two. It allows, it allows them to absorb shooting slumps, and it allows so much if he just gets it back up to that all-star level, which I think we can, anyone with eyes would tell you he's just not there right now. And it's been a weird year where, I do think sometimes fans have the memory of fish and just forget that he's like, no, he was awesome last year and he was awesome the year before. He's just had a weird year. I think he'd probably tell you that. I mean, the poor guy had his jaw wired shut for 6 weeks, or whatever
and honestly,
it was.
Like, not even just last year. Like, he had found his footing, right? Like when you listen to the interviews about, him talking about how challenging it's been to have his mouth wired shut, to take away basically like his happy place, as he calls it, like being on the basketball court. Like that's his number one thing. That's where he's happiest. Like he had found his footing prior to that stretch. Like for a month straight, 13 games, he was averaging, 24 points per game, 7 assists, shooting 37% from 3, efficient from the field. And the Cavs were 17 points better in terms of net rating with him on the court versus off, right? Like he had already got back up to that level. And I think you're right. Like he was the guy that I was predicting would make the leap this year, and circumstances have delayed that. But it kind of like, I still think that leap is there, and it might just end up being like Kyrie in 2016, where, missed a lot of the season.
People forget how rough Kyrie was for a lot of that regular season.
Took him forever, to start getting in shape, and then started to take off after the All-Star break. And then things started to click for him. He got back into shape, and then obviously was part of our championship run, right? I think that the team is understanding with Darius. I think he's been so impactful, and the team has been so much better with him on the court, like throughout his entire Cavs tenure, that you just got to kind of have a little bit of patience with it. Like we all understand that the level he's at right now isn't what they need from him, but he's still a helpful player as is.
And if there was ever a time to be patient, this would be the time. 16-1 in their last 17 games. I believe they reported it was the best non-LeBron stretch in Cavaliers history. Like no Cavs team has ever gone 16-1 that didn't have LeBron. How long was that ridiculous winning streak in 2018. Was it like 23 games or something like that?
Yeah, I thought it was 16.
Yeah, it wasn't 23. It was in the tens or in the teens. You're right. Either way, so like we're not there, but we're not that far from there, and like in much more encouraging fashion. You know, I guarantee if you held those two 16-game stretches up against each other, this one would look a heck of a lot better, even though it includes a loss. So yeah, that never had a more miserable double-digit win streak in the history of basketball. This has been, you know, truly fun. It's been dominant. Everyone is picking up for everyone else, even on the nights where Max has a bad game or George has a bad game or, you know, Jarrett has a bad game. You know, I don't think Jarrett was particularly good against Washington, and guess who was there? Evan to pick it up. You know, everyone's been there for each other, and basically what it's allowed is everyone is playing positive in the aggregate. They just don't have anyone who's not playing good basketball. And to go back to that, to circle back to the, you know, the deadline stuff, that's why you don't make a trade, because everyone's playing well. And like, if everyone is at kind of their conceptual version of who you had in mind when you put the team together, why would you break that up?
Yeah, I totally agree. Carter, if I've looked a little uncomfortable these last few minutes, it's because you unlocked something in my mind. It's not something that we had on the rundown, but it's something we need to discuss. You mentioned, you know, Darius getting back to that all-star level, and I think we need to mention an all-star snub. And for the health of this podcast, I think I need to recuse myself, at least from the initial thoughts on this matter, and you can go first about Jarrett not making it with Trae Young and Scotty Barnes. With Trae Young, I think he absolutely deserved it. I think he's, you know, as much as Atlanta has had a lot of problems, I don't think that it's on him. I think he's been playing harder on defense this year and absolutely deserves it. Carter, your thoughts?
Justin, I just want to say I loved your tour of, you know, because the thing about being Justin's podcast co-host is you're just in a lot of communication channels with him. You're in G-Chat. You're in the Discord. You're in 3 or 4 different group DMs with different friends around the basketball community. And in every single one of them, Justin tried to hold someone accountable for Scotty Barnes going to the All-Star game. He bit off poor Steve Jones's head.
Oh, poor him and the guys. And both of them picked Jarrett. Both
of them picked Jarrett. They just, the most positive basketball podcast in the country, just happened to make the vague case for why Scotty could be an all-star. And Justin's like, I just want to hear the case. I just want to hear it. I just want to hear
I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking questions.
You were unhinged, and I know you were playing up a little bit for comedic humor, but not all the way. Yeah. You lost the plot, buddy. Sometimes
I allow like being self-aware to be an excuse for me being unhinged. And
it was great.
It's not enough.
I had such fun watching you absolutely lose your mind, literally the entire day. Because it wasn't like a 20-minute window. It was. I saw this thing repeat itself every 2 hours on the hour. Here's what I'll say. It
was a consistent heat. It was a consistent simmer.
Here's what I'll say. I'll say that I thought Jarrett really, really deserved to be an all-star. He has played like one for you know, pretty much the whole season, but especially the last 20, 30 games. We know recency bias tends to factor in to these kinds of discussions. I think the fact that the Cavs as the 2 seed in the conference and now the comfortable 2 seed in the conference is the only of the top 5 teams to not have 2 all-stars. That's a bummer. With that said, it's just so hard. You know, there are a lot of really great players who didn't make it. You know, I totally get Trae Young. I know 22 and 29 doesn't feel good, but like, I mean, he is a great player. You know, Jimmy Butler doesn't make it. No one else on the Pacers makes it. So like, I get it.
22 and 29 certainly feels better than 18 and 33. Proceed.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only case I would really make against Scotty. It's less about for Jarrett and more like I just feel like once you're that far, they're on pace for like 37 wins right now. Or I'm sorry, like 28 wins or 29 wins. I forget exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Not 37. 37 is actually not that bad. They're when you're going to win less than 30 games, your numbers better blow me off the page. And like Scotty's just didn't. So I was surprised to see it. But also Scotty has made a big jump this year. He's been available. I don't think he's missed many games.
Mm-hmm.
Would I have rewarded someone like Jarrett? Or I actually probably would have gone up to a third Celtic before I would have gone to Scotty. I would have gone with a Porzingis.
I may have gone with Siakam.
Yeah, and I thought Siakam.
You want to talk about the pace Toronto's at? Like a lot of that had to do with Pascal, right? Like Scotty is having an all-star caliber season, and I'm a believer in what JJ Redick has talked about, how like the team should be 15, not because like, hey, there's more all-star caliber players than ever. Like that's a factor, but just that it was set at 12 at a time where the league had a lot fewer teams. So like,
yeah, and also you have 15 active players.
You have 15 active players on a roster, so it just makes a lot of sense. I know people have kind of done the Thad Young thing with Scotty, where they've taken like his points per game and assists and added the rebounds to filter the number of players doing that. But like he's 52nd in points per game, and I believe there's 30 players averaging more assists. So like the rebounds doesn't really move me like that. But when you have to make cuts of all-star caliber players, and like they're like, there's going to be snubs that are all-star caliber. I just think, especially in the NBA where we've expanded the postseason to 10 teams, you at least got to be in that 10.
I'm disappointed that I just don't think it's rewarding the right stuff, and I don't think that the numbers are so much better as they are in the case of Trae Young's that it makes sense. Yeah. Again, if it had been Porzingis, I would have been disappointed, but maybe a little less so. But I also am famously not on record as not caring that much about All-Star and snubs and award snubs. So I will continue to not get worked up and allow you to get worked up on my behalf. Yeah. And Dunker Spot, we're sending a nice gift basket to both your homes just as way of apology. Justin's very, very sorry.
Yeah, the most important thing is playing at an all-star caliber level, and that's what really matters, right? Like even when we go into a playoff series, you might not have the best player at a certain position, but if the players that you have are capable of outplaying the guys on the other side, which, going back to Kyrie in 2016 with Steph, everyone would pick Steph over Kyrie, but Kyrie outplayed him. That's the type of thing that we're going here with the Cavs this year. So
Cavs Twitter aficionado and friend Tony Pesta says in the chat, "Your Honor, Justin was simply letting them know."
And really, that's what we're here to do. We're letting them know. Big thanks to everyone that tuned in live on the chat. We will be coming at you guys Monday next week after the game. Who do we play again? That's Philly, right?
That's Philly.
Man, that snuck up on us fast. The All-Star break is almost here. Excited for that. We should have a lot of good stuff for you guys next week. Really, really excited. If you're tuning in live on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe. Click notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of the review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.